A millionaire abandoned his wheelchair-bound daughter in a derelict house with the cleaning lady, cutting her out of his life forever. 15 years later, while watching television, he sees his daughter reveal something unbelievable in front of the entire world. The majestic Pacific Heights mansion stood like a monument to wealth and power against the city skyline. Inside, surrounded by cold marble and expensive art, Raphael Bali paced the floor of his office, staring at the quarterly reports displayed on multiple screens. His company, Intrepid Technologies, had revolutionized the tech industry, making him one of the wealthiest men in the continent. Yet today, his attention kept drifting to the framed photograph he'd buried in the bottom drawer of his desk years ago. "Mr. Bali, your 3 o'clock appointment is waiting," his assistant's voice chirped through the intercom. "Give me 5 minutes," Raphael replied, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. He opened the drawer and pulled out the photo. His late wife Eleanor smiled back at him, her auburn hair catching the sunlight. Beside her stood a small girl with the same hair, her posture slightly awkward due to her condition. Lily, his daughter. 15 years had passed since he'd made the decision that his board of directors and PR team had assured him was the right one. 15 years since he'd driven Lily to that remote property in Mendocino County and left her with Martha, the housekeeper who had worked for his family for over a decade. 15 years of monthly payments that eventually stopped when his empire began to crumble. The memory still stung. Eleanor's accident had happened just weeks before Intrepid's international expansion. The doctors had called it a combination of exhaustion and emotional distress. The car had veered off Highway 1, plunging into the ocean below. Raphael had been in Tokyo, negotiating a merger that would add another billion to his net worth. When he returned, he found himself the single father of a 6-year-old with a neuromuscular condition that required constant care. A child whose existence he'd kept mostly hidden from his professional circles, fearing that his daughter's disability would tarnish the image of perfection he'd meticulously crafted. "Mr. Bali." "They're still waiting," the intercom buzzed again. Raphael slammed the drawer shut. "Send them in." 3 executives entered, each carrying tablets displaying the same concerning data. Intrepid Technologies was bleeding market share. Competitors had caught up with his innovations, and the company's stock was plummeting. "The quarterly numbers aren't good, sir," said Vanessa Harris, his CFO. "We've lost another 15% in market value since last month." "And the new product line?" Raphael asked, his voice betraying no emotion. "Delayed again. R&D says they need at least another 6 months. Raphael's empire was crumbling, just as his personal life had years ago. Once hailed as a visionary, he now faced the prospect of becoming irrelevant. The board was growing restless, and rumors of a potential coup swirled through the executive floors. "Find a solution," he commanded, "whatever it takes." As the meeting ended, Raphael turned to look out over the San Francisco Bay. He'd spent decades building his company, sacrificing everything for success. Now, as it all threatened to slip away, he wondered if it had been worth it. In the small coastal town of Fort Bragg, California, where the redwoods meet the Pacific Ocean, 21-year-old Lily Chen worked diligently at her laptop. The small cottage she shared with Martha Warner sat on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the vast expanse of water that had taken her mother's life. "Lily, dinner's ready," Martha called from the kitchen, her voice warm and gentle as it had been since the day she became Lily's guardian. "Just a minute," Lily replied, finishing the final paragraph of her article on accessibility in public transportation. Despite her condition, which caused occasional muscle weakness and coordination difficulties, Lily had thrived intellectually. Self-educated through online courses in the town's small library, she had become an eloquent writer and passionate advocate for disability rights. Her blog, Beyond Barriers, had gained a modest following in activist circles. Martha set the table, arranging the simple meal of fish stew and homemade bread. At 62, her once dark hair was now streaked with silver, and the lines around her eyes had deepened. The financial struggle had been constant since Raphael Bali had stopped sending money when Lily turned 18, but Martha had never regretted her decision to raise the girl as her own. "How's the article coming along?" Martha asked as Lily joined her at the table. "Almost finished. The Disability Rights Forum in Oakland wants to publish it next week." Lily tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, a gesture reminiscent of her mother. "I've been invited to speak at their conference next month." "That's wonderful," Martha beamed with pride. "Your mother would be so proud of you." The mention of Eleanor, a familiar sadness flickered across Lily's face. "Do you think she would be? Sometimes I wonder what she'd say about how my life turned out." Martha reached across the table and squeezed Lily's hand. "She'd be amazed by your strength and your compassion, and she'd be grateful that you didn't become—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Like him?" Lily finished, her voice hardening slightly. "It's okay, Martha. We can say his name. Raphael Bally. My father, who decided I wasn't worth his time or his reputation." Martha sighed. She had tried over the years to soften the abandonment, to explain that Raphael was a complicated man who didn't know how to handle grief or imperfection. But Lily had grown up with the sharp edge of rejection cutting into her heart. "He made his choice," Martha said finally, "and we made ours, to live with dignity and purpose." After dinner, Lily returned to her work. Her small room, once part of the old house's sunroom, offered a panoramic view of the ocean. The Bally family's forgotten property had fallen into disrepair over the years, but Martha had managed to make the cottage section comfortable and warm. As Lily edited her article, an email notification popped up on her screen. The sender's name made her freeze. Jake Mitchell, investigative journalist for the Bay Area Chronicle. Subject: Your story matters. Dear Ms. Chen, my name is Jake Mitchell, and I've been following your blog for the past few months. Your perspective on accessibility issues and social inclusion has been eye-opening. I'm currently working on a documentary series about hidden stories of resilience and systemic exclusion, and I believe your journey could offer valuable insights to our viewers. Would you be willing to meet and discuss the possibility of sharing your story? I understand this is a personal request and completely respect your privacy if you choose to decline. Sincerely, Jake Mitchell. Lily stared at the screen, her heart racing. She had always kept her connection to Raphael Bally private, writing under her mother's maiden name rather than his surname. Her advocacy work had been focused on systemic issues rather than personal narrative. But now, a journalist, a stranger, wanted to place her story in the spotlight. The thought was both terrifying and strangely appealing. For years she had lived in the shadows, invisible to the world her father dominated. Perhaps it was time to step into the light. She clicked reply and began to type. In downtown San Francisco, Jake Mitchell sat in his cluttered office at the Bay Area Chronicle, sorting through footage for his documentary series, Invisible Americans. At 32, Jake had already made a name for himself with his sensitive approach to difficult stories and his unwavering commitment to amplifying marginalized voices. Still here, Mitchell? His editor, Vanessa Rodriguez, leaned against the doorframe. It's almost midnight. Jake rubbed his tired eyes, just waiting on a response from a potential interviewee. This one's special, Vanessa. She's been advocating for disability rights from a unique angle, and there's something about her writing that suggests there's a much bigger story there. Vanessa smiled knowingly. Always the detective. What's her name? Lily Chen. She runs a blog called Beyond Barriers, lives up in Fort Bragg. Vanessa's expression changed subtly. Chen? Not related to Eleanor Chen, who was married to Raphael Bally, Jake finished. I'm not sure yet, but I have my suspicions. The timing fits, and there are rumors that Bally had a daughter who disappeared from public view around the same time his wife died. Tread carefully, Jake, Vanessa warned. Bally may be on the decline now, but he still has powerful friends, and if this is his daughter, there might be reasons she's kept her identity private. Jake nodded, understanding the sensitivity of the situation. I know. That's why I've approached her about her advocacy work first. If there's more to the story, I'll let her be the one to tell it. A notification sound interrupted their conversation. Jake turned to his computer and smiled. She's agreed to meet. As Vanessa left, Jake stared at Lily's response, a mixture of professional excitement and personal curiosity washing over him. There was something about her words, her passion for justice, that resonated deeply with him. He had covered countless stories throughout his career, but he had a feeling that Lily Chen's might change everything. Not just for his documentary series, but perhaps for him as well. What he didn't reveal to Vanessa was that early in his career, he had briefly worked for a media company owned by one of Bally's subsidiaries. The connection was tenuous but real, and Jake wondered if he should disclose it to Lily when they met. His journalistic integrity demanded transparency, but he feared it might close a door that had barely opened. The San Francisco night sparkled with lights beyond his office window, each one representing lives and stories intersecting in ways both mundane and extraordinary. Somewhere out there, Rafael Bally was watching his empire crumble. And in a small cottage on the edge of a cliff, Lily Chen was contemplating stepping into the public eye for the first time. The stage was set for their worlds to collide once again. The coastal highway stretched before Jake Mitchell like a ribbon of possibility as he drove north toward Fort Bragg. The radio played softly in the background, a local station reporting on Intrepid Technologies' continued stock decline. Jake smiled grimly at the irony. He was heading toward a meeting that might illuminate the human cost behind Rafael Bally's empire, just as that empire was beginning to falter. He had spent the past week researching Lily Chen, piecing together fragments of a story that remained largely hidden from public view. Her blog posts revealed a brilliant mind and a compassionate heart, but they offered little about her personal history. The few photographs he found showed a young woman with striking auburn hair and intelligent eyes, using a sleek modern cane for support when standing. As the redwoods thickened around the highway, Jake rehearsed his approach. He would focus first on Lily's advocacy work, building trust before probing deeper. Journalistic instinct told him there was something extraordinary in her story, something that could elevate his documentary from compelling to transformative. The GPS directed him onto a narrow road that wound toward the ocean. The property appeared at the end of a gravel driveway, a weathered Victorian house with a smaller cottage nestled beside it. Both structures stood proudly against the backdrop of the Pacific, defiant in their simplicity compared to the opulence Jake had glimpsed in photos of Bally's San Francisco mansion. Jake parked his car and took a deep breath before gathering his equipment. This first meeting would set the tone for everything that followed. A silver-haired woman opened the door before he could knock. "You must be Mr. Mitchell," she said, her expression a mixture of warmth and wariness. "I'm Martha Warner." "It's nice to meet you, Ms. Warner. Thank you for welcoming me into your home." Martha nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. "Lily's on the back deck. She enjoys the ocean view while she works." Jake followed Martha through the cottage, noting the modest furnishings that somehow created an atmosphere of genuine comfort. Photographs adorned the walls, Lily at various ages, always with Martha beside her, their smiles reflecting a bond that transcended conventional family structures. On the deck overlooking the dramatic coastline sat Lily Chen, her laptop open on the table before her. She turned as they approached, and Jake was struck by how her presence seemed to magnify in person. There was a quiet strength in her posture, despite the physical challenges her condition presented. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for making the drive up from San Francisco." "Please call me Jake," he replied, shaking her hand, "and thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Martha excused herself to prepare tea, leaving them alone with the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below. "Your blog has quite a following in advocacy circles," Jake began, setting up his recording equipment with practiced ease. "What inspired you to start writing about accessibility issues?" Lily smiled, relaxing slightly. "Living with a disability gives you a different perspective on how the world is designed. Spaces, systems, even attitudes, they're all created with an assumed standard of physical ability. I wanted to challenge that assumption, to show how exclusionary it can be." "Your approach is unique," Jake observed. You focus on systemic change rather than individual accommodation. Because that's where the real problem lies, Lily replied, passion animating her features. Society treats disability as an individual burden rather than a collective responsibility. We design buildings with steps, then add a ramp as an afterthought and expect gratitude. We create digital platforms that are unusable for people with certain impairments, then act surprised when they can't participate fully in modern life. As Lily spoke, Jake found himself captivated not just by her words, but by the conviction behind them. This wasn't rehearsed rhetoric. It was lived experience transformed into eloquent advocacy. Martha returned with tea and their conversation continued exploring Lily's vision for a more inclusive society. Jake asked thoughtful questions, genuinely interested in her perspective, while carefully avoiding any direct inquiries about her parentage or past. An hour passed before Jake gently steered the conversation toward more personal territory. Your writing suggests you've had to overcome significant barriers beyond your physical condition. Would you feel comfortable sharing some of that journey? A shadow crossed Lily's face, and she glanced at Martha, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. I grew up here in this house with Martha raising me, Lily began, her voice steady but with an undertone of carefully controlled emotion. My mother died when I was 6. My father decided he couldn't or wouldn't raise a child with a disability. He believed it would damage his public image. Jake maintained a professional demeanor despite the surge of confirmation that his suspicions were correct. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was, Lily acknowledged, but Martha gave me something my father couldn't. Unconditional acceptance. She never saw my condition as a liability or a burden. Martha reached over and squeezed Lily's hand. This child taught me more about strength than anyone I've ever known. Jake noticed the silent communication between them, the years of shared struggle evident in that simple gesture. Would you consider sharing this aspect of your story in the documentary? It powerfully illustrates how societal attitudes toward disability affect even the most intimate family relationships. Lily hesitated. I've never spoken publicly about my father. I've built my identity apart from him. And that's entirely your choice, Jake assured her. The documentary can focus solely on your advocacy work if you prefer, but I believe your personal experience could resonate deeply with viewers, not as a story of victimhood, but as one of remarkable resilience. As the afternoon light began to fade, they moved inside. Jake shared his vision for the documentary series, emphasizing his commitment to ethical storytelling and subject agency. Lily listened attentively, asking incisive questions about how her story would be framed and used. Why did you become an investigative journalist? She asked suddenly, turning the interview back on him. Jake paused, taken by surprise. I believe stories have power, he finally said. The right story, told honestly and completely, can change how people think, how they act, even how they vote, or spend their money. I wanted to find those stories, especially the ones that might otherwise go untold. And is that what you see in me? An untold story with the power to change perspectives? Their eyes met, and Jake felt a moment of genuine connection that transcended the professional relationship they were forming. I see someone who has transformed personal pain into purposeful action, he replied. That's rare and valuable, whether or not your last name is significant. Lily smiled slightly. So you know. I have suspicions, Jake admitted, but they're not why I'm here. Your advocacy work stands on its own merits. As the evening progressed, their conversation deepened. Jake shared stories from his career, the injustices he'd witnessed, and the impact his reporting had achieved. Lily spoke of her dreams for expanding her advocacy work, perhaps even starting a non-profit organization dedicated to universal design principles. When Jake finally prepared to leave, Lily had made her decision. I'll participate in your documentary, Mr. Mitchell, but I have conditions. I'm listening. I maintain approval over how my story is presented. Nothing airs without my consent. And if at any point I decide to withdraw, you respect that decision completely. Absolutely, Jake agreed without hesitation. This is your story to tell on your terms. They shook hands, sealing an agreement that would alter both their lives in ways neither could anticipate. Raphael Bali sat alone in his home office, the lights of San Francisco twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Once those lights had seemed like a visual representation of his dominance, each one a node in the network of influence he had built. Now they merely emphasized his isolation. His assistant had left hours ago, along with most of his staff. The mansion that had once bustled with activity, employees, business associates, the occasional carefully selected social gathering, now echoed with emptiness. The latest board meeting had been brutal. Shareholders were demanding answers, and his leadership was being questioned openly for the first time in decades. His vision, once hailed as revolutionary, now seemed outdated in a rapidly evolving tech landscape. Raphael poured himself another scotch and opened his laptop. He had taken to monitoring social media and news outlets obsessively, watching his reputation erode in real time. Tonight he typed his own name into the search bar, sifting through the usual business analyses and critical commentaries. A new headline caught his attention. Bay Area Chronicle announces documentary series on invisible Americans. Normally he would have scrolled past such a story, but something compelled him to click. The article described an upcoming series by investigative journalist Jake Mitchell, focusing on marginalized individuals whose stories challenged systemic inequalities. Her preliminary list of subjects included disability rights advocates, among others. Raphael was about to close the page when a name in the article made his heart stop. Lily Chen. The scotch glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. He stared at the screen, rereading the paragraph that mentioned disability rights blogger Lily Chen, whose powerful advocacy has challenged conventional approaches to accessibility. It couldn't be a coincidence. Chen was Eleanor's maiden name, the name his daughter would have used if she wanted to separate herself from his legacy. With trembling fingers, Raphael opened a new browser window and searched for Lily Chen Disability Blog. The results loaded instantly, and he found himself looking at a photograph of a young woman with auburn hair that matched Eleanor's exactly. Her features were a perfect blend of his wife's delicate beauty and his own stronger angles. There was no doubt. This was his daughter, the child he had relegated to a remote property and gradually erased from his life. Raphael spent hours reading every post on Lily's blog, absorbing her eloquent arguments and passionate calls for change. Her intelligence shone through every paragraph, her empathy evident in how she advocated not just for herself, but for a more inclusive society for all. Pride and shame collided within him, creating a storm of emotions he had not allowed himself to feel in years. She had become extraordinary, not despite his absence, but perhaps because of it. She had found strength and purpose that his wealth and influence could never have provided. As dawn broke over San Francisco, Raphael made a decision. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he rarely used personally. "Stephen," he said when his attorney answered, "I need you to find someone for me, and I need absolute discretion." In a small apartment across the city, Jake Mitchell reviewed the footage from his interview with Lily. Her story was even more compelling than he had anticipated, her articulation of complex social issues, both accessible and profound. His phone rang, displaying his editor's name. "Vanessa, it's late." "What's up?" "Jake, you need to see this." Her voice was urgent. "Someone's been asking questions about your documentary series, specifically about Lily Chen." Jake sat up straighter. "Who?" "A private investigator working for Stephen Caldwell's firm." "Bally's attorney," Jake murmured, the implications immediately clear. "How did he find out so quickly?" "Your preliminary subject list was in the press release, remember? If Bally has been monitoring mentions of his name in the media, he might have connected the dots." Jake cursed under his breath. "I need to let Lily know. This could complicate things." After hanging up, Jake stared at the frozen image of Lily on his screen. He had promised her agency in telling her story, but now external forces were already threatening to wrest control from her hands. What he hadn't told Vanessa, what he hadn't told anyone, was how deeply Lily's story had affected him personally. Beyond its journalistic value, beyond his professional interest, he found himself drawn to her resilience and clarity of purpose. Their connection felt significant in ways he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Jake picked up his phone again, this time to call Lily. Whatever was coming, she deserved to be prepared. And he was determined to protect her right to tell her story on her own terms, regardless of what Raphael Bally might attempt to do. As the phone rang, Jake wondered if he should disclose his past brief association with one of Bally's media companies. The connection was minimal. He had worked there for less than 6 months early in his career, but in the interest of complete transparency, perhaps Lily should know. But before he could decide, Lily answered, and the warmth in her voice when she recognized him pushed all other considerations temporarily aside. The documentary production moved swiftly over the next few weeks. Jake made frequent trips to Fort Bragg, each visit deepening his understanding of Lily's story and strengthening their connection. The cameras captured her daily life, her writing process, her interactions with the local community, the physical challenges she navigated with quiet determination. But it was the moments between filming that Jake found himself treasuring most. They would often sit on the deck after Martha had gone to bed, talking until the stars emerged over the Pacific. Lily shared stories of growing up in the isolated property, how Martha had created a sanctuary of acceptance despite their limited resources. Jake told her about his rise through journalism ranks, his determination to use his platform for meaningful change rather than sensationalism. "Why haven't you asked me directly about my father?" Lily questioned one evening, the ocean breeze carrying her words across the space between them. Jake considered his response carefully. "Because I want this documentary to be your story, not his. When, or if, you want to discuss Raphael Bally, that should be your choice." Lily smiled, appreciation warming her expression. Most journalists would have led with that connection. It's what sells, isn't it? Abandoned daughter of tech mogul speaks out. "I'm not most journalists," Jake replied simply. Then after a pause, "There's something I should tell you, though. Early in my career, I briefly worked for a media company that was owned by one of your father's subsidiaries." He watched her reaction closely, relieved when she merely raised an eyebrow rather than shutting down. "How briefly?" 6 months. About 7 years ago. I was a junior reporter covering tech industry news. I never met Bally personally." Lily absorbed this information, her fingers tapping thoughtfully against her teacup. "Why tell me now?" "Because trust matters to me," Jake said, "and because I want there to be complete transparency between us." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, both aware of the subtle shift occurring in their relationship. The professional boundaries were blurring, giving way to something neither had anticipated. "Thank you for telling me," Lily finally said, breaking the silence. "I appreciate your honesty." In San Francisco, Raphael Bally received the private investigator's report with mounting frustration. The man had located Lily easily enough, but had been unable to make direct contact. Martha Warner had rebuffed his attempts to approach the property, and Lily hadn't responded to any messages. "She's working with a journalist," the investigator explained. "Jake Mitchell from the Bay Area Chronicle. They're producing a documentary series." Raphael's jaw tightened. "What angle are they taking?" "It's called Invisible Americans. Focuses on people who've been marginalized by society. Your daughter appears to be featured because of her disability advocacy work, not specifically because of her connection to you." Raphael dismissed the investigator and turned to Stephen Caldwell, his attorney of 20 years, who had sat silently through the report. "Options, Stephen." Caldwell adjusted his glasses, a gesture that always preceded his most calculating advice. "We could try legal channels, claim potential defamation, privacy concerns, but that would only draw more attention. Alternatively, we could approach the journalist directly, offer an exclusive interview with you as part of the documentary, control the narrative." Raphael walked to the window, considering. "Find out everything you can about this Jake Mitchell. What motivates him? What are his vulnerabilities? And your daughter," Caldwell asked carefully, "what exactly do you want from her?" Raphael didn't immediately answer. What did he want? Reconciliation seemed too simple, too optimistic given the magnitude of his abandonment. Forgiveness, perhaps, but there was something else, something he could barely acknowledge to himself, a desperate need to undo the most significant mistake of his life before it was too late. "I want to make things right," he finally said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. Caldwell nodded, though his expression suggested skepticism. "I'll arrange a meeting with Mitchell." After the attorney left, Raphael returned to his computer, once again scrolling through Lily's blog. Her latest post discussed the documentary project, mentioning Jake Mitchell by name and praising his authentic approach to storytelling. The fondness in her writing was unmistakable, suggesting a relationship that had evolved beyond the professional. For the first time in years, Raphael felt a flicker of something resembling jealousy. This journalist had earned a place in Lily's life that he, her father, had willingly abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Mr. Mitchell, there's someone here to see you." Jake looked up from his editing bay to see his assistant standing nervously in the doorway. "I don't have any appointments this morning." "He says it's regarding Lily Chen. It's Stephen Caldwell, Raphael Bali's attorney." Jake's stomach tightened. He had been expecting some kind of approach from Bali, but not this direct confrontation. "Send him in." Stephen Caldwell entered with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to intimidating others through his mere presence. Tall and impeccably dressed, he carried a leather portfolio that he placed precisely on the edge of Jake's desk. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for seeing me without an appointment." Jake didn't rise from his chair. "What can I do for you, Mr. Caldwell?" "I understand you're producing a documentary featuring Lily Chen. My client, Raphael Bali, is interested in participating in this project." Jake maintained a neutral expression, despite his surprise. "Really? And why would Bali suddenly take an interest in a documentary about marginalized Americans?" Caldwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Bali has a personal interest in Ms. Chen's story. I believe you're aware of their connection." "I'm aware that he abandoned his daughter because her disability didn't fit his perfect image," Jake replied, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "What I'm not clear on is why he'd want to revisit that decision now." "People change, Mr. Mitchell. My client has been reflecting on his past choices and wishes to make amends." Jake leaned back in his chair, studying the attorney's impassive face. "This documentary is about Lily's advocacy work and her personal journey. It's not a vehicle for Bali's redemption narrative." "Perhaps not," Caldwell conceded, "but wouldn't a complete story include both perspectives? Journalistic integrity would suggest as much." The implied challenge to his professional ethics wasn't subtle. Jake felt a surge of irritation but kept his voice even. "The documentary will present whatever perspective Lily wishes to include. If she wants to hear from her father, that's her decision." Caldwell nodded as if this was precisely the answer he'd expected. "Fair enough. Please convey my client's interest to Ms. Chen. He would welcome the opportunity to speak with her directly." "I'll pass along the message," Jake agreed, though he already anticipated Lily's reaction. As Caldwell prepared to leave, he paused, his hand resting on the portfolio he'd brought. "One more thing, Mr. Mitchell. My client mentioned you once worked for Meridian Media." Jake stiffened. Meridian had indeed been owned by one of Bali's holding companies. "Briefly, years ago. And you've disclosed this connection to Ms. Chen?" "I have," Jake replied, meeting the attorney's gaze steadily. "Excellent. Transparency is so important in relationships of all kinds." With that parting comment, laden with implication, Caldwell left the office. Jake sat motionless for several minutes after the door closed. The interaction left him unsettled, not just because of Bali's unexpected interest in the documentary, but because of Caldwell's final remark. The attorney had been suggesting something beyond professional disclosure, something personal about Jake's growing feelings for Lily. How much did Bali know? And more importantly, what was he planning to do with that information? "He wants to be in the documentary?" Lily's voice was incredulous as she paced the cottage living room. "After 15 years of silence, he suddenly wants to tell his side of the story." Jake watched her from the sofa, giving her space to process. "That's what his attorney said. I told him it would be entirely your decision." Martha brought in a tray of tea, her expression troubled. "This isn't like Raphael. He's always preferred to control situations from behind the scenes. His empire is crumbling," Jake pointed out. "Maybe he's looking for a new narrative, one that humanizes him." Lily stopped pacing, turning to face them both. "So I'm supposed to provide that for him? Help rehabilitate his image after he discarded me like damaged goods?" "You don't owe him anything," Jake assured her. "If you want to continue the documentary without his involvement, that's exactly what we'll do." Lily sank into an armchair, suddenly looking exhausted. "What would you do, professionally speaking?" Jake considered the question carefully. "As a journalist, I'd say that including his perspective would create a more complete narrative. It would also draw more attention to the documentary, and by extension to your advocacy work." "And personally?" Lily pressed, her eyes meeting his. "Personally," Jake hesitated. "I think you deserve answers. Whether or not you choose to forgive him, hearing his explanation might provide a kind of closure." Martha placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But remember that this documentary isn't just about your relationship with Raphael. It's about the important work you're doing." Lily nodded, her expression clearing as resolution replaced uncertainty. "You're right. My advocacy has always been bigger than my personal story." She looked at Jake. "Tell Bally he can participate, but on my terms. We film at a neutral location. I ask the questions I want answers to, and I maintain final approval over how the footage is used." "I'll make the arrangements," Jake promised, admiring her strength and clarity even as concern lingered. Bally was a powerful man accustomed to controlling every situation. How would he respond to Lily's conditions? As production continued, the documentary expanded beyond Lily's individual story to include other advocates in the disability community. Jake's vision of showing systemic exclusion through personal narratives was taking shape, with Lily emerging as a central, compelling voice. Their professional collaboration continued to deepen into something more personal. Jake found reasons to stay in Fort Bragg longer than necessary for filming, and Lily began accompanying him on interviews with other subjects when her health permitted. They developed a natural rhythm of working together, anticipating each other's thoughts and complementing each other's strengths. "You've changed since you started this project," Vanessa observed one evening when Jake returned to San Francisco for editing sessions. "This story means more to you than the others." Jake couldn't deny it. "Lily's remarkable. What she's accomplished despite everything stacked against her, it's inspiring." "Just be careful," his editor warned. "You're walking a fine line between documenting her story and becoming part of it." Jake knew she was right, but the connection he felt with Lily had become too significant to dismiss as merely professional interest. When they spoke on the phone each night, their conversations ranged far beyond the documentary, exploring dreams, fears, and the small details that composed their lives. He was falling in love with her, gradually, inevitably, and the realization both exhilarated and terrified him. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, its brief message sending tremors through Lily's carefully constructed world. "Dear Ms. Chen, my name is Daniel Bally. I believe we share a father. I would very much like to meet you if you're willing. I've been following your blog for some time and admire your advocacy work tremendously. I understand this message may come as a shock. I've known about you for years, but respected your privacy until now. Recent events have made me reconsider my silence. Please contact me at this email address if you wish to speak further. Sincerely, Daniel Bally." Lily read the message 3 times before calling for Martha, who hurried in from the garden, still wearing her gardening gloves. "What is it, dear?" Martha asked, alarmed by Lily's expression. "I have a brother," Lily whispered, turning the screen so Martha could read the email, or at least someone claiming to be my brother. Martha's face paled as she scanned the message. "Daniel Bally," she murmured. "I remember rumors years ago about Raphael having a son from before he married your mother. Eleanor never mentioned him, though," Did my father abandon him too? Lily wondered aloud, a new anger kindling within her. Is this a pattern with him? I don't know, Martha admitted. But be careful, Lily. The timing of this contact seems convenient, given your documentary and Raphael's sudden interest in reconnecting. Lily nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be a manipulation orchestrated by her father? Or was Daniel Bally genuinely reaching out, perhaps seeking the same answers she had sought for years? She reached for her phone to call Jake. If anyone could help her navigate this new complication, it would be him. In his Manhattan apartment, Daniel Bally closed his laptop after sending the email to Lily. At 36, he bore a striking resemblance to a younger Raphael, the same commanding presence and sharp features, softened only slightly by his mother's influence. Unlike his father, however, Daniel had chosen a career in humanitarian work rather than technology, running an international non-profit focused on educational access. His relationship with Raphael had always been complicated. Born to Raphael's college, girlfriend before his meteoric rise in the tech world, Daniel had been acknowledged but kept at arm's length, provided for financially but never truly welcomed into Raphael's life. When Raphael married Eleanor Chen, Daniel had been a teenager, already accustomed to his peripheral status in his father's existence. He had learned about Lily's existence through his own investigations years ago, but had respected her apparent desire for privacy. Now, with Raphael's empire crumbling and rumors of a documentary circulating, Daniel felt compelled to reach out. If Lily was finally confronting their shared legacy, perhaps they could face it together. His assistant knocked on the office door, interrupting his thoughts. "Your 2 o'clock is here, Mr. Bally." Daniel straightened his tie and closed the browser window displaying Lily's blog. "Send them in, please." As he rose to greet his visitors, Daniel wondered if Lily would respond to his message, and what it might mean for both of them if she did. Neither had asked to be born into Raphael Bally's complicated web of relationships and ambitions, yet both had been shaped by his presence and his absence. Perhaps together they could finally break free of their father's shadow. Raphael Bally sat across from his attorney in the back of a private car, reviewing the conditions Lily had set for his participation in the documentary. "She wants to control the narrative," Caldwell observed. "Are you prepared for that?" Raphael stared out at the San Francisco streets passing by. "I've controlled everything in my life for decades, Stephen. Look where it's gotten me." The attorney raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Have you located Martha Warner?" Raphael asked, changing the subject. "Yes. She's still with Lily, has been all these years. They appear quite close." Raphael nodded, memories surfacing of the determined housekeeper who had always treated Eleanor with unusual gentleness. Martha had been one of the few staff members who had seemed genuinely grieved by Eleanor's passing. "There's something else you should know," Caldwell added, his tone careful. "Daniel has made contact with Lily." Raphael's head snapped up. "What? How do you know this?" "We've been monitoring communications as requested. He emailed her yesterday, identifying himself as her half-brother." Raphael fell silent, absorbing this unexpected development. His son and daughter, the two children he had failed in such different ways, were now connecting independently of him. The realization filled him with an emotion he couldn't immediately identify. Not quite fear, not quite hope, but something hovering uncomfortably between the two. "Sir?" Caldwell prompted after the silence had stretched too long. "How would you like to proceed?" Raphael made his decision. Set up the meeting with Lily as she requested, and prepare a letter. There are things she needs to know before we meet, about her mother, about Martha. He paused, the words difficult to form. About the truth. As the car continued toward his empty mansion, Raphael contemplated the unraveling of the carefully constructed facade he had maintained for so long. Perhaps it was fitting that as his business empire crumbled, so too did the walls he had built around his personal failures. The question that haunted him now was whether anything worthwhile could be salvaged from the ruins. Lily sat alone in the neutral meeting space Jake had arranged, a private room in a San Francisco hotel that balanced elegance with accessibility. Her cane rested against the armchair as she reviewed the questions she had prepared, each one distilled from years of unspoken pain and unanswered doubts. The documentary crew had set up discreetly, cameras positioned to capture both participants without being intrusive. Jake stood to the side, his presence providing a quiet reassurance. They had discussed this moment extensively, preparing for every possible response from Raphael Bally. "He'll try to control the conversation," Jake had warned. "It's instinctive for him." "Not this time," Lily had replied, her determination evident in the set of her jaw. Now, as the scheduled meeting time approached, Lily's resolve remained firm despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. She had waited 15 years for answers. 15 years to ask why she hadn't been enough for her father to love. The door opened, and Stephen Caldwell entered first, his assessing gaze taking in the room setup before he stepped aside to allow Raphael Bally to enter. Lily's first thought was how diminished he seemed compared to the images splashed across business magazines and tech websites. The commanding presence that had dominated boardrooms now appeared hollow, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose on his frame, yet his eyes, those she recognized immediately, they were her eyes, a genetic inheritance she had never been able to escape. "Lily," Raphael said, his voice softer than she had imagined it would be. She didn't rise to greet him. "Mr. Bally, please sit down." If her formality wounded him, he didn't show it. He took the seat across from her, dismissing Caldwell with a slight nod. The attorney retreated to the far corner of the room, his presence a silent reminder of the power dynamics at play. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Raphael began. "I agreed to include your perspective in the documentary," Lily corrected. "This isn't a reconciliation." Raphael nodded, accepting her terms. "Before we begin, I'd like you to read something." He removed an envelope from his suit pocket. "It's important that you have this information before we speak further." Lily glanced at Jake, who gave a subtle nod. She took the envelope, noting the weight of the heavy stationery. "What is this?" "The truth," Raphael replied simply. "About your mother's passing, about Martha, about decisions I made that shaped both our lives." Lily hesitated, then opened the envelope and began to read. As her eyes moved across the pages, her expression shifted from guarded to shocked, then to a profound grief that made Jake step forward instinctively, before restraining himself. When she finally looked up, tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Is this true? My mother, she was suffering emotionally before the accident." Raphael nodded, his own composure cracking slightly. "Eleanor struggled with isolation after your birth. I was rarely home, focused entirely on Intrepid's expansion. The company physicians prescribed medication, but it wasn't enough. She needed support, connection, things I failed to provide." "And Martha?" Lily asked, her voice hardening. "You tried to pay her to abandon me too." 3 years after I left you with her," Raphael admitted. "I told myself it was for your own good, that a clean break would be better than my sporadic attention. Martha refused. She said—" His voice faltered. "She said you deserved better than to be abandoned twice." Lily's hand tightened around the letter. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you deserve the truth, however ugly it is." Raphael leaned forward, his gaze direct. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Lily. What I did, leaving, you treating your condition as a liability rather than embracing you as my daughter, it's unforgivable. I know that." "Then what do you want?" Lily demanded, her voice rising slightly. "I want you to know that my failure as a father reflects nothing about your worth and everything about mine." Raphael's carefully maintained facade crumbled completely, revealing the broken man beneath. "You are extraordinary, Lily, not despite your challenges, but because of how you've faced them. The person you've become, that's in spite of me, not because of me." The sincerity in his voice caught Lily off guard. She had expected corporate doublespeak, carefully crafted non-apologies designed to rehabilitate his image. Instead, she was witnessing a genuine reckoning, a man confronting the ruins of his most catastrophic personal failure. "Your advocacy work," Raphael continued, "it's making a difference. You're reaching people, changing minds. You've built something meaningful while I was building something hollow." Lily studied him for a long moment. "I spent years hating you," she finally said. Years wondering what I could have done differently, how I could have been worthy of your love. Raphael flinched visibly at her words. But eventually, Lily continued, I realized that the problem was never me, it was you. Your fear of imperfection, your obsession with controlling every variable in your life, you couldn't accommodate. A child who didn't fit your vision of success. Yes, Raphael agreed, his voice barely audible. That's exactly right. I don't need your validation anymore, Lily said firmly. I don't need your approval or your resources or your name. I've created my own identity, my own purpose. I know, Raphael acknowledged. I'm not here to reclaim a role I abandoned. He paused, searching for words. I wanted you to hear the truth from me, and to tell you that I see you now, Lily. Too late, but I see you. The room fell silent, except for the soft whir of camera equipment. Jake remained motionless, witnessing the raw emotion unfolding before him with professional detachment, despite his personal investment in Lily's well-being. I've met Daniel, Lily said finally, introducing a new element to the conversation. Your son? Raphael's surprise was evident. You've met in person. Last week we had dinner together in Oakland. He's nothing like you either. No, Raphael agreed with a sad smile. He inherited his mother's compassion, another relationship I mishandled. He told me about growing up on the periphery of your life, Lily continued. Present, but never truly included. In some ways, that seems more cruel than my complete abandonment. Raphael didn't attempt to defend himself. I failed both of you, in different ways but with the same root cause, my inability to value anything beyond my own ambitions. Lily set the letter aside, straightening in her chair. I have questions for the documentary. Are you ready to answer them on camera? Raphael nodded, preparing himself for the public reckoning he had agreed to face. For the next 2 hours, Lily led a methodical interview, asking questions about Raphael's decision-making process when he chose to leave her, his perception of disability as a liability, the values that had driven his life choices. Raphael answered each question directly, refusing to hide behind corporate language or self-justification. When they finally concluded, Raphael looked exhausted but somehow lighter, as if the weight of unspoken truths had been physically oppressive. What happens now? He asked as the crew began packing up equipment. Now I finish telling my story, Lily replied. Not as Raphael Bali's discarded daughter, but as Lily Chen, advocate, writer, complete person in my own right. Raphael nodded, understanding that she was not offering reconciliation or an ongoing relationship. Thank you for hearing me out, he said simply, rising to leave. As he reached the door, Lily called after him. The forgiveness you're looking for, it isn't mine to give. It's yours to earn, not through grand gestures or public confessions, but through changed behavior over time. Raphael turned back, a question in his eyes. There are organizations working on accessibility initiatives that desperately need funding and visibility, Lily explained, not just for people with conditions like mine, but for the full spectrum of human ability. If you're truly different now, prove it through sustained, humble support of that work. I will, Raphael promised, recognizing the opportunity she was offering, not for redemption, but for meaningful atonement. After he left, Jake approached Lily carefully. Are you okay? She exhaled slowly. I don't know yet. It was not what I expected. You were incredible, Jake said, his admiration evident. The way you maintained control of the narrative while still allowing for authentic exchange, it was masterful. Lily smiled tiredly. I've had 15 years to prepare for that conversation. What do you think about his letter, the revelations about your mother? It changes things, Lily admitted. Not about him, but about how I understand my own history. My mother wasn't just a victim of a tragic accident. She was suffering, isolated, overwhelmed. And Martha, her voice caught. Martha turned down money to keep me. She chose me when no one else would. Jake took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. What can I do? Just be here, Lily replied, squeezing his fingers, and help me finish this documentary. It matters even more now. 3. Months later, Jake sat in the editing room reviewing the final cut of Invisible Americans with Lily beside him. The series had evolved into a powerful exploration of systemic exclusion, told through personal narratives, with Lily's story forming the emotional core. The final episode culminated in her confrontation with Raphael, a scene that had generated significant buzz in early screenings. The raw honesty of their exchange had surprised everyone who knew Raphael Bally only as a calculating tech mogul. "There's something we need to discuss," Jake said, pausing the footage. "The network wants to edit the final scene to create a more uplifting conclusion. They're suggesting we cut it to imply forgiveness and reconciliation." Lily's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. That would be a complete misrepresentation of what actually happened." "I agree," Jake assured her. "I've told them I won't approve any edits that distort the truth of your story. But they're pushing back, arguing that viewers want resolution, a neat, inspirational ending." "Life doesn't work that way," Lily replied firmly. "Real healing isn't about quick forgiveness, it's about holding people accountable while creating space for genuine change. If we edit that reality away, we undermine the entire message of the documentary." Jake nodded, already formulating his response to the network executives. "I'll make it clear that we're holding firm on this. If necessary," Lily added, "I'll withdraw my consent for the footage to be used at all. I won't have my experience sanitized for public consumption." Their stance created tension with the network, but ultimately Jake's reputation and Lily's moral clarity prevailed. The documentary would air uncompromised, presenting the complex, unresolved reality of her relationship with Raphael rather than a manufactured reconciliation. The night before the premiere, Jake and Lily walked along the beach near her cottage, the familiar sound of waves creating a peaceful backdrop for their conversation. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Jake asked. "A little," Lily admitted. "Once this airs, I can't take it back. My story becomes public property in a way." "Not entirely," Jake reminded her. "I've maintained control of how it's told. That matters." Lily stopped walking, turning to face the ocean. "When I first agreed to this documentary, I thought it would be about my advocacy work. I never imagined it would lead to confronting my father, discovering a brother, or—" She looked at Jake meaningfully. "Or finding you." Their relationship had deepened throughout the production process, evolving from professional collaboration to friendship to something much more significant. Both had been cautious, aware of the ethical complexities, but the connection between them had proven impossible to deny. "I came to Fort Bragg looking for a compelling story," Jake said, taking her hands in his. "I found that, but I also found something I wasn't looking for, someone who changed how I see the world." Lily smiled, the moonlight illuminating her face. "We make a good team, don't we?" "The best," Jake agreed, leaning down to kiss her gently. The documentary premiered to critical acclaim and passionate public response. Lily's story resonated with viewers far beyond the disability community, sparking conversations about family obligation, societal expectations, and the meaning of true acceptance. Raphael Bally watched the final episode alone in his San Francisco mansion, witnessing his own failings projected in high definition. The public reaction was mixed. Some praised his honesty, while others condemned his past actions regardless of his apparent remorse. Raphael accepted both responses as warranted. True to his promise, he established a foundation dedicated to accessibility initiatives, placing the funds in a trust structure that removed his control while ensuring sustainable support. He invited both Lily and Daniel to serve on the advisory board if they wished, but made it clear that their participation was entirely their choice. Daniel accepted the role, seeing an opportunity to guide meaningful change while maintaining a cautious relationship with his father. Lily declined initially, preferring to maintain her independence, though she agreed to consult occasionally on specific projects that aligned with her advocacy priorities. Martha Warner, whose unwavering loyalty had given Lily the foundation to thrive, was honored specifically in the Foundation's mission statement. When reporters asked about her role in the Bally family story, she redirected attention to the systemic issues the documentary highlighted, refusing to indulge public curiosity about private pain. 6 months after the documentary aired, Lily published a memoir that expanded on her experiences while focusing primarily on her vision for a more inclusive society. The book became a bestseller, further amplifying her voice in national conversations about accessibility and human dignity. Teos, a book signing in Seattle, a young girl with a neuromuscular condition similar to Lily's, waited patiently in line with her parents. When she finally reached the table, she looked up at Lily with admiration. "Your story helped my dad understand me better," she said simply. "He reads your blog with me now." The girl's father nodded, visibly moved. "You've given us a language for things we couldn't express before." Lily signed the book with particular care, writing a personal message of encouragement. This was why she had ultimately agreed to share her story, not for personal vindication or public attention, but for moments like this, when vulnerability translated into connection. Jake, who had accompanied her on the book tour while working on his next documentary project, caught her eye from across the room and smiled. They had built something remarkable together, a partnership that honored both their professional passions and their personal bond. That evening, as they walked through downtown Seattle, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "You know what I've realized," she said to Jake. "My father spent his life building things that ultimately didn't last. His company is being sold off in pieces. His reputation has crumbled. But what we've built, the connections we've made, the conversations we've started, that has staying power." Jake nodded. "That's the difference between empire building and community building. One is about control, the other is about contribution." "Exactly," Lily agreed. "And I choose contribution, messy, collaborative, human-scale contribution every time." As they continued walking, Lily thought about the letter from her father that she kept in her desk drawer. The revelations it contained had reshaped her understanding of her past, but they didn't define her future. She had reclaimed her narrative, transforming a story of abandonment into one of self-determination and purpose. Raphael Bally had built an empire that ultimately collapsed under the weight of its own hollow ambition. Lily Chen had built something entirely different, a life of meaning, connection, and genuine impact. In the end, that was the most powerful response to his rejection she could have crafted. Not forgiveness offered too easily, not reconciliation, without accountability, but the quiet triumph of becoming exactly who she was meant to be, not despite her challenges, but through them. Not as a rejection of her complicated heritage, but as a transcendence of it. The ultimate reclamation was not of her relationship with her father, but of her own story, told on her own terms, in her own voice, with all its complexity intact. Dear listeners, we hope that Lily's journey of reclamation and self-discovery has touched your hearts. Her story reminds us that true empowerment comes not from erasing our wounds, but from transforming them into sources of strength and connection. If you've been moved by this narrative of resilience and authentic healing, we've created a special playlist with equally compelling stories that explore the complexity of family relationships and personal identity. You'll find it by clicking the link to your left. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring you unique narratives that explore life's deepest challenges and most beautiful transformations. Don't miss our upcoming content. We have many more stories waiting to be told. We look forward to reading your thoughts and reflections in the comments below.